When we arrived in Argentina, I spoke really no Spanish. Just a couple little tiny phrases that I had frantically memorized via a tutor at the MTC in the few weeks prior to our departure, but it was pitifully little and not at all functional, really. I fast found that those Argentines, even the ones who spoke some English, were really not inclined to go there. They loved their country, they loved their culture, they loved their language, and they kind of felt, I think, like a lot of North Americans feel, that it really was better if the people who came there kind of met them on their terms. But I loved those people. I was fascinated and enchanted by them and was so eager to connect myself to them. And even more than that, I was really eager to make a contribution and to be useful. And as they whisked my husband promptly off to the area office, and he had a big job to do, and I was left in this upstairs apartment in a 17 million person metropolis, and I looked out those windows at all those people passing by to whom I could not say a word, I just thought, what now? What am I going to do? All by myself in that little place without the capacity to contribute. That was the real killer. I began studying Spanish, but it came slowly. I mean, it was half a century old, and brain tissue was just not terribly well accommodated to learning a language at that point in a person's life. So it came slowly. It was hard. We'd been there 5 months when the fellow who was the head of the church education system there, Nestor Curbelo, came to our home. And I invited him in. It wasn't remarkable, particularly, to have someone from the church come. They came periodically, typically with a delivery for my husband or a message for me to give him or something like that. But I welcomed him in, and I did understand enough Spanish that after a few pleasantries, when he extended to me the invitation to accept the obligation to teach early morning seminary to the Spanish young people in our ward there, beginning at 6 a.m. in the morning after summer vacation was over, which was 2 months in the future, I knew what he had said. And I knew enough Spanish to answer with a spontaneous sí. No me diga, which means essentially, you have got to be kidding. and he wasn't. And I accepted, because that's what you do when you're asked to do something in the church, right? You accept faithfully, with confidence that somehow there must be a way. Over the next couple of months, I studied my brains out and was still only very partially really prepared to be equal to that task. I could barely speak English at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Teaching's so give and take.
Not to mention Spanish. It's not like you can have a script and read it to those kids. Yeah. And most of all, I didn't want to compromise their learning of the gospel, their growing in faith. It wasn't supposed to be about me and my verb conjugations. It was supposed to be about their studying the gospel. So I just felt this desperate need to be able to do it adequately. Anyway, long story short, with the empowerment of heaven, the grace of God, which is always our only hope, really, I found a way. And at the end of a class, when I'd celebrate the fact that I felt sure that we'd all felt the Spirit and grown in faith, I'd take a deep breath and I'd think, oh, now what about tomorrow? And day by day, it came, little at a time, really just a step at a time, a little bit of light and then a little bit more. And over time, as I taught those kids, as it was important for me to speak Spanish, not for anything relative to myself, but for the benefit of those kids who deserved it, then it came. And I taught for 3 years and loved every minute of it.
And probably learned in the process who the true teacher is.
Oh my goodness, isn't that the truth? In fact, I found that I did very little talking, especially early on, because I simply couldn't. I couldn't give a lecture. I didn't have the language to give a lecture. So I depended more on the Spirit and more on those kids. And I crafted that class to focus more on them. It was much more student-centered than teacher-centered. And in the end, I think it was better than when I had taught in California, and there had been more focus on me than there had been on the students on occasion.